Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order, a special meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners to have further discussions regarding the motion that came from the Budget Committee, or sorry, City Council via the Budget Committee on the HRP budget. The agenda has been sent to everybody. We just have the one item on the order of business today. Are there any additions to the order of business from anyone? Seeing none, I'll call for a motion to approve the order of business.
I so move. Lisa?
Moved by Lisa Blackburn, and I'll have a seconder.
Carol.
Carol has seconded, so the order of business is approved. Oh, sorry, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No, motion is carried. Thank you. Next up is the call for declaration of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared for today's meeting? Seeing none, that's great. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda for today is the revised Halifax Regional Police 2020-2021 budget. So Dan, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Chair. I sent, or Robin Dean would have sent out a slide deck earlier. Don't know if you guys have that. There we go. Okay, perfect. So I'll run through the slide deck. A lot of it is review, so I won't spend a lot of time on the review areas, but we'll spend some time on the proposed new scenarios and then go from there. So next slide, please. So there you see the original police budget at over 89 million and the original reduction target of 5.5 million. Next slide. On May 20th, the reduced budget was presented to council, and at that time a motion was put forward and sent back to the board for a presentation on two different scenarios, one reflecting 4.5 million in reductions and one reflecting 3.5 million in reductions. Next slide. So some of the key considerations for the new scenarios is the ability to fill key sworn and civilian vacancies, lower reductions related to training, lower reductions in non-compensation areas, particularly related to equipment and communications, and then retaining additional contracted staff in order to keep more offices open and continue with site security and other services. There you have the three scenarios, the previous proposal, and then scenario one with a total budget of just over 85 million, total reductions of 4.5. Compensation reductions would drop to 3.2, and non-comp would drop to 1.2. The second scenario, which is a 3.5 million total reduction, leaves the budget at 86 million and change, with compensation related reductions at 2.5 and non-compensation related reductions at just under $1 million. And very quickly, this is the previous with 28 staffing reductions, considerations for court time and overtime. Next slide. And the 1.4 million in non-compensation reductions with the areas listed. Next slide. So for scenario one, at 4.5 million reduction, what we would be looking at is a total of 19 staffing reductions, including vacancies and retirements, for 11 total sworn members and 8 total civilian members. And 25% reduction maintains for both overtime and court time. And these proposed reductions would bring the total in compensation down to 3.2 million. And as far as non-compensation goes, for the areas listed, the total proposed non-compensation would drop to 1.2 million and change, giving you a total of 4.5 million. Next slide. Scenario two, which is 3.5 million reduction proposal, brings us down again to a total of 12 staffing reduction, including vacancies and retirements, and would only leave us with 7 total sworn and 5 total civilian members to be filled. And that also assumes a 20% reduction in both overtime and court time, and it brings the proposed reductions in compensation down to 2.5 million. And as far as non-compensation reductions, would bring lower again in that area to just under $1 million. The largest piece here that would allow us to continue with some of our contracted and external services, which would allow us to keep some of our stations open outside of our headquarters here in Gottingen. And I think that would have a very positive impact with the community. And there's the scenarios, 4.5 million, 3.5 million, respectively. You can see, obviously, with a reduction means that we're able to bring more people back to work, and also able to make some changes to those critical non-compensation areas that can help us with our running of the service. And subject to that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, so what I'll do, as we've done with previous meetings, is go through the order on the speakers list for questions, giving each member a chance to ask any questions that they have. And then at that point in time, we will go to the chat. So I'll start with Carol. Carol, did you have any questions or comments?
Could I delay my position in the order? I'm just thinking through a few things.
Absolutely, I'll come back to you. Carlos, Commissioner Beals, were you able to join us? No, not hearing Carlos. Lisa, Commissioner Black, or I guess, do I call you Deputy Mayor, Commissioner? I'm going to go with Lisa.
That always works for me. I just had a couple of quick questions. I'm wondering about the Boots on the Street program and these budget cuts, what the impact is going to be to the Boots on the Street program, its budget, and officer reductions. So that's question one. Two, I'm just wondering if capital projects were considered for cuts as part of these new budget scenarios. Three, I'm wondering with the changes in the budget, when is the next training class anticipated? And four, how many officers do we have that are eligible to retire right now?
Okay, thanks, Commissioner. And I'll start with, through you, Chair, I'll start with the Boots on the Street. So currently the Boots on the Street program continues. We have in the area of 25 officers funded through that program, and there'll be no effect on that program from our end. And I have not heard any alterations from the provincial level to that program. So hopefully that stays where it is. As far as capital goes, capital was considered. And we've had several conversations about that, and it's been considered throughout the budget process, but no capital changes are reflected in the two proposed scenarios for today. The next recruit class is expected to be in the winter of 2021. We've just recently, as you would have heard, Commissioner, at the last meeting, had some discussions with HRPA in regards to the reserve officer program. So we're in the process of having some further conversation around that, and then setting up the recruit police sciences program. There's quite a bit of work to be done in that area. There's a lead up. Obviously, we have to get the promotional material out. We have to recruit, get our candidates in, and then run them through the selection process. So the preliminary work for that has begun, and we'll continue to press ahead on that. And then as far as the retirements go, I think I'm in the ballpark here. We're sitting right around 50 officers that have reached that age where they could retire. As we have discussed, it changes fairly regularly, and currently sitting at 10 with a potential 11th for this year. So that's yet to be confirmed, but pretty much right up until June 30th, we will can expect to hear about retirements for 2020. That ties into pre-retirement leave and those kind of things. So other than that, we're probably looking at about 10 of the 50 that have committed to going. So around another 40 that would be able to go. The other part of that is that changes, probably monthly, because every month that goes by, somebody reaches retirement age.
So with this budget, I mean, I'm just concerned that if all of those officers who are eligible to retire decide in the next 6, 8, 10 months that they're going to pack it in with the hiring freeze, how is that going to leave you?
Well, certainly it wouldn't be good if everyone decided to walk out the door at the same time. However, we've been using this system where we, manage our vacancies. We ask people to let us know in advance if they are retiring. There are some obligations that they have in regards to notification, so we rely on them to do that. Historically, they have done that, and we've been able to fairly accurately plan. But to your point, chances of it happening, I think, are slim, that all 50 would walk out the door, but could it happen? Potentially. And we would have to manage through other means of filling for the service, whether it be through lateral hires, reaching out to the Atlantic Police Academy, finding those individuals that might be available with the skills that are currently unemployed in law enforcement, those kind of things. So we have contingency plans in place, and we will continue to monitor and pay attention to that to make sure we're staffed.
All right. Thank you for that.
Great. Anything else, Lisa? No? Okay. Great. Next, Commissioner Mancini, Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chief. Good to see it come back. I'm hoping that it was a little more pleasant exercise for you from 5.5, and that's the intent all along, Chief. And I think it was quite clear at the Budget Committee meeting when many of my colleagues spoke what their concerns are when we see cuts to the police department. For me personally, my concerns, and I didn't see it in this report because you didn't get into the details of what positions specifically, but a lot of my colleagues have a lot of concern over that CROs, the community relations officers. A lot of us have many concerns about traffic. We're seeing a difference in traffic now than we ever saw before, and the number of complaints from residents, and feeling that that'll become worse with less enforcement. So those are some of the things that school liaison officers, we understand the cuts now, but what happens in September when September comes back in? Like the CROs, they play such an important role in our communities, and to lose it is a step back. So I'm concerned about that, not seeing that reflected in this budget, how it's going to impact those positions. Also, the deputy mayor talked about capital projects, and you said there was considered, but there was no capital changes. Could you explore that a little further? What was considered and why there was no decisions to make any adjustments to the capital projects versus just the personnel? And those are my questions for now, and I can put the motion on later on, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with capital, Commissioner, through you, the chair, or through the chair, I should say, to you, Commissioner. The capital considerations. So we have capital spending in the area of police equipment, and obviously some of those things include, bulletproof vests and ammunition and those kind of things that speak to the very heart of public safety. So decisions were not made to cut in that area. There are other capital budget areas that we work on with HRM. And they are primarily around some of our IT related projects and our fleet. And also in that area, there were some decisions made not to change the funding in that area. So, most specifically around our vehicles, I'm not sure that we can run with not a well-maintained fleet and or replacement of the vehicles. So those are some of the main areas. There are other capital areas that, while I do have input on, and we do have input on as HRP, we don't have the ability to, make final decisions on what's going to happen with those projects. So I did mention in one of our previous meetings where we talked about not only capital, but also reserves and some of the challenges around that. And, it really just comes down to, the prioritization of where we're going to put any of the funds that we have. And we have to do that with great consideration to public safety, with great consideration to making sure that officers are well equipped and well trained and all those kind of things. And this happens, almost daily in regards to the prioritization. So as far as CROs and SLOs, I know they're a particular concern of yours, and they bring great value to the community. They bring great value to the schools. Officer presence is one of the fundamental pieces of law enforcement, is having an officer out and about on the street in uniform. And I can tell you that currently right now with our COVID environment and our COVID deployment, we have never had more officers out and about on patrol, on the street, on the front lines. They are interacting in a bit of a different way, but we're constantly making assessments and already looking at, what does school liaison officers or CROs look like in the fall when schools go return in September. So we're putting our mind to that and having those conversations. Your point about traffic is a very important one. Fundamentally, traffic enforcement, traffic education, trying to get compliance from those drivers. I took your mention of stunting complaints that you brought forward last week, and we've certainly been checking into that. Just so the board is aware, when our traffic members are out and they're currently out on patrol, oftentimes they're out doing traffic enforcement. They are actually on motorcycles. All those kind of things are happening. So it's not the same kind of, traffic unit deployment out in, a group of a team of potentially 6 or whatever on a shift. But they are out and about, and we will continue to monitor that and make sure that we're bringing in the appropriate, not only enforcement pieces to traffic, but also the education piece.
Thank you, Chief. In no way when I asked a question about equipment or capital, I don't think anybody's suggesting that you be on the cheap when it comes to vests and ammunition on that piece. We were definitely referring to fleet and IT projects as an example. But, with regard to the CRO work, my concern is that what you can't replace is the relationships and the trust that they have in the communities. That's the key. And I think I used the examples at the budget committee. We have many examples where maybe it's a domestic abuse call where the person involved would actually call the CRO directly, or when there's a major crime in one of our communities, it's very often the CRO gets the details because there's the trust there. And so it's not only me, I think numerous of my colleagues agree on that. So glad to hear about the traffic piece. It's still there, but it's different. I think at some point in time, Chief, there needs to be some sort of communication or procedure to follow, because we as counselors get the calls probably more so than the calls to the non-emergency number. And our residents are looking to us for a response. So we have a traffic calming response, which takes forever. And that's a whole different story altogether that my colleagues will tell you about. So how do we engage policing during that? So that's not something to discuss now, but wherever we go further, Chief, that has to be determined. What's that look like? How do we communicate that? Because we're going to constantly get those calls, and we're getting more of them now. So those are my questions for now. And then, Madam Chair, once we go through everybody, again, I'll put the motion on, and we can have further discussion if you wish then. Thank you.
Jane, just wondering if you had any other comment on the capital piece, just where that isn't included under the 89 million budget for HLP directly. Was there anything else you wanted to say about capital budget?
Thank you, Commissioner, Madam Chair. So the capital piece, we had a look at it as a senior leadership team to see which capital projects could be deferred, could be moved. As the police chief said, a number of he has a very small capital budget. It is equipment, it's vehicle, and some IT. When you look at the vehicle line, what's important to look at is the capital spending that would have occurred in the previous years. They took a holiday on their police and unmarked vehicles, so they are a bit behind on that. So looking at that and the delivery time and the need for vehicles, it was determined that it wasn't feasible to reduce the capital budget there. On the business intelligence or the IT, the two projects that they have that are both currently, one is underway. It's the records management, and that's simply their ability to move to an electronic system, which allows them to track their files, their casework, all of their evidence. It's very, very important for their work. And the other one is cybersecurity. So that project is scheduled for this year. Once again, the whole organization is focused on cybersecurity and the need to have systems monitored and protected. So that's the reason on the capital side why there weren't any further reductions. All business units, we run an operating budget and then a global capital budget, which have all the projects embedded in those.
Great.
I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, next, Lindell. I don't know if you've had a chance to review the presentation. You've just joined us. Did you have any questions at this point in time on the materials?
So sorry, two things. I had something come up, and also I had some computer issues, so my camera might be a little different now too. I had to kind of disassemble it. Anyway, my biggest thing was, and I might have missed it, was the CROs, and I don't know what, because I missed the presentation piece. I'm not sure what aspect the two scenarios has on the community response officers. So that's really my biggest question today, and I think, Tony, you spoke on it just a second ago, so maybe this doesn't include them, but if I could just get clarification, because again, sorry, I missed that presentation piece.
Thanks, Commissioner, through you, Chair. So I can comment a little bit further. So with the 4.5 million in reduction proposal, we're still going to have 19 staffing vacancies. With the 3.5, we'll still have 12. So that's better. That gives us here at HRP more officers to deploy. So that allows us to put more people into more positions. I think that the takeaway from this is it's not business as usual. And as a result of that, we're not going to be able to fill every position, because with either scenario, we're still going to have some vacancies. 3.5 is better with 12, much easier to manage, and we'll continue to do that. Commissioner Mancini brought up some really good points about trust in the CROs. And, you know, the community response model came up, you know, in the early 90s and started to develop. So trust is a very important aspect of it. There's also familiarity. There's also, you know, understanding, you know, what's going on in individuals' communities, so you can, you know, respond appropriately and all those kind of things. And all of those things are very, very important, and we'll maintain them as best we can. Fundamentally, and Commissioner Blackburn opened it up with the boots on the street, and I alluded to it a little bit when I was talking. Our necessity to ensure that we have a frontline patrol response, responding to those emergency calls for service, will need to be maintained, and we will always maintain that. Everything else we will certainly deliver to the extent we can with the resources we have. And, you know, scenario number 2 at 3.5 certainly allows us to do that a little bit better. The other thing I will say, and I've said it several times, I said it at council, I said it to you as a board last week, these are temporary, non-permanent reductions in our budget. We are still in COVID. There's still things that are shut down and not operating, schools, those kind of things. However, we are seeing a big uptick. This last weekend was a great example of that. Many more people out and about. You know, traffic is picking up, all those kind of things. So those are things that we as the police service have to respond to, have to prioritize, and have to get ourselves out there to make sure that we're providing the service as best we can with the resources we have.
Okay. Any other questions, Linda? Linda, I think you're muted.
Yeah. All right, I'm back. Sorry. So if I have anything else, I'll wait for the motion to get on the floor, then I'll speak on the motion, but I think I'm good for now.
Okay, that's great. Next up is Tony, Commissioner Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just, no real question, but just a couple of comments. I know when the benefit of being the last in line here, all the questions are basically asked before they get to me, so that's great. As far as recruiting, Chief, really nice to hear that the recruiting process is going to take place next year. I know that's one of the issues that I discussed with you, that make sure that we have enough staffing is there. Community offices, that's one of the biggest things with the organization I work for as well, is that we have a good relationship with the HRP and the CROs. We passed back a wealth of information, which is it's been a really good information gathering piece for us, and it's very much a benefit to help our supervisor guys in the community. I'm just unclear, and maybe I missed this part, but reserve officers, I'm not really sure. I may have missed the presentation or when you talked about that, so I really don't know what they are or who they are. Could you maybe just fill me in briefly of what the reserve officer is?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Commissioner, through you, Chair. So the Reserve Officer Program is a program that's basically spelled out in the collective agreement between ourselves and the HRPA. And in there, it allows for the maintenance of a reserve officer pool. The officers need to be trained by the organization that's employing them, so that would be us. So we have our police sciences program. There needs to be some discussion with the union, and this might be a real good time to hammer out some things with collective bargaining coming up and resuming very shortly, I think, and have that discussion. Now, the challenge with the reserve officer program is it takes a long time to get a reserve officer program going, and what I mean by that is about 18 months turnaround on our program. So and I spoke about it just a little bit earlier. The marketing, the recruitment, getting the applicants in, getting them screened, running the training course for about 8 months, give or take, and then having a pool of officers ready and able to be deployed from the program. Now, there's certain caps on the number of officers that can be in it. There's caps on how long they can be in the program, those kind of things. But certainly that, had we had the foresight to know that COVID was coming and did some pre-planning 2 years ago, we could potentially be running a reserve officer program now that we would be able to fill some of our vacancies with. So that's in a nutshell how it works. The other part of our police sciences program, as you'll recall, in the fall, we graduated 23 people and we had 23 vacancies to put them into. So that's also a good thing to have. The reserve officer program may allow us to run a few programs back to back, maybe one a year for the next 3 years, and not only maintain the officers that we need, but also run a bit of a reserve officer program so that we can take from that program periodically when vacancies arise. And just as a quick reminder, we have been vacancy managing in this organization for a long time. And, even if tomorrow, when this goes to council, if council agrees to the 3.5 million in reductions, it's going to take some time to be able to fill the spots. But at least knowing that the money is there, we can begin that work and start down the path.
Okay. Tony, any other questions?
Oh, that's good for me. Thank you for that explanation, Chief.
Great. Carol, I'll circle back to you.
Thank you, Natalie. I just have two questions. We've talked a lot about CROs, and I wondered if you could give me a sense of how many there are. And so in a given community, are there 2 or 3 CROs, or is it just one? Do they work shift? Just to kind of get a sense of that. And does every district, area, community, whatever the definition of that is, have a CRO? My second question is a little bit tied to Tony Thomas's question about reserve. when you talk about reserve officers, is this kind of like, you know, Department of Defense reserve officers where people do training and then they go back to a regular job and then they come back to do some upgrading and then go back to regular job? But if there's a need for an officer for a couple of months or a year, they're called in to work in that sense. Is that the same sort of principle? And those would be my questions.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner, and through you, Chair. So I'll start out with the CROs. So the CROs are broken down by division, and they're assigned, there's a number assigned to each of the divisions. Within the CROs, there are CRO officers or SLOs who are assigned to the schools. And they generally deal with issues at each of the high schools and then the feeder schools up through the program to the high schools. So there is somebody assigned, and to Councillor Mancini's point, you know, people get to know who's who and they know where to call. The officers are given a cell phone so they can maintain those contacts. Community relation officers are very similar, and they are deployed in the divisions to handle divisional issues, and they do a very good job at it. I'm not going to give you the exact number of CROs and SLOs, but suffice it to say that the number is, you know, determinant a little bit on what's happening. So for our CROs, they also look after, you know, all of our parades, all of our community events, all of those things. To work schedules, they generally work day shifts. However, they are very flexible in their deployment, and that's why we often see them out in the evenings and on the weekends. And they work towards, you know, a flexibility to meet everybody's needs, whether it be the communities or the organizations. So they do excellent work. You know, traditionally, things slow down a little bit in the summertime because some things aren't happening. A lot of people are away, those kind of things. I think Commissioner Smith mentioned the community offices. We're currently reviewing our ability to be present in those offices on a regular basis. And we'll continue to do that and make sure that we provide a service. But so we're always looking at that and making sure that we have that ability. School office, school resource officers, they ramp up obviously come September. Excuse me, I'm looking for a little bit of water, but I just haven't been able to find it. So at any rate,
you don't have a fever with that cough, do you? Runny nose, sore throat?
I don't know. This might be the last you see of me for 14 days. Anyway,
don't jinx them. My God, don't jinx them.
So that's as far as CROs go. Now, again, and I'll tell you and reiterate the great work that they do, the difference that they make in the community. Tremendous work that they do. And that's why I think it is usually Councillor Mancini, but others, when a CRO gets moved, I usually hear about it because you get to know them. They're like family. The community gets to know them. And sometimes we got to move them for development and other things. Generally speaking, they are, you know, high flyers and that kind of thing. So I've said it before, I said last week, and I'll just say very quickly again, we won't be shutting down any units in their entirety. But if we have to run gaps, we're not going to be able to run full force. So we will continue to deliver and do the very best we can with the resources we have. And hopefully we get out of this COVID environment sooner rather than later. And when the next budget comes around, we're back up to full funding. As far as the reserve officer program goes, it is a pool of officers that work not a full cadre of hours. They can be deployed up to a lower amount of hours, so we don't have to, they're not full-time employees, but we are responsible for training them. They would have to be ready to go when we needed them, those kind of things. And again, there is some details that we still have to work out in regards to the discussion, but the parameters of their use and deployment currently are very clearly defined in the collective agreement, and they're an excellent resources to be able to have to draw upon. So I don't know that I would compare them exactly to the military. It's similar, I think, in that respect of terminology, They're trained, they're equipped, they're ready to go, and they're available if we need them.
That's everything, Carol?
Yes, thank you.
Great. I just had one question for you, Dan. Slide 10 refers to a 20% reduction in overtime and court time, whereas the other slides refer to 25%. Is that just a typo?
No, thank you, Chair. So whenever we're doing these scenarios and trying to, determine where we go and how we fund each of our buckets, compensation-related items are very clearly important. It's people, and that's where our strength comes from, our people. But there also are a number of non-compensation items that are very important. Obviously, overtime and court time are two of those areas. Currently, with the courts closed, we're saving a little bit of money in regards to court time. We've recently heard that they might fire up as early as June. If that happens, we're going to be immediately incurring court time expenses. Overtime, again, is something that we have to manage. We're taking every ability that we have right now to kind of keep an eye on it, make sure that we're not using overtime unnecessarily. But it's been brought up. I think it was at council meeting last week. If we get a homicide or something like that, it kind of changes completely our approach to overtime. So what we did there is look at the threshold for the money that we had and how can we best spend it, put it through the distiller to see where we're going to put it. And remember, these are just priorities of where we expect the funding to go. The very nature of law enforcement means that from time to time, things have to change on our end. We have to reprioritize and re-respond. And that's why that is there. The other part with the non-compensation piece, particularly in scenario 2, will allow us to keep some contracted staff on staff so we can maintain open stations at least during business hours beyond COVID. Currently, you'll know that our East Station and our West Station, Convoy Run and Mellor Avenue, are currently closed due to COVID. Excuse me, but I know that the community would like to see someone there. That particular scenario will allow us to keep those offices and stations and open and supplying services to the community.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So just going to go to the chat to see if there were any additional questions now that we've been through everybody. Open up their chat. I don't see any there, which is great. So Councillor Mancini, I do believe you wanted to speak to the motion. So,
Madam Chair, I can put the motion on the floor first, if you wish.
Yeah.
So put the following motion on the floor that the Board of Police Commissioners recommends the Budget Committee of the Halifax Regional Council receive the board's additional budget considerations for a budget reduction of either 4.5 million or 3.5 million in comparison to the proposed 5 million budget reduction. So moved.
Is there a seconder?
Seconded by Lisa.
Great. Discussion on motion.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And my intention with these motions is do exactly where we are now, to have some more options to choose from. I think the discussion we started to go down the path today will be that much greater once we get to the Budget Committee. So I asked my colleagues today in the Board of Police Commissions to approve the budget. When it gets to the Budget Committee for discussion, I suspect it'll go down that path again, which we started today around boots on the street, capital versus staff, and particularly the RCOs and that type of thing. But so I just ask everybody to support that today, and then we'll have further discussion when it gets to the Budget Committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. If anyone else has any discussion on the motion, you just want to indicate in the chat. Oh, Lindell, I'll let you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Thanks. I knew that'd be an easy way to do it. Really quickly, so do we, as the commission, need to choose a scenario, or do we send these scenarios presented and then council chooses a scenario?
So that motion is based on the discussion out of the budget committee, and I'm going to look to my lawyer, Marty Ward, here. So I think our option is, really, do we accept that motion and put that forward, or is there another motion that someone would like to put forward? Marty, am I stating anything incorrectly?
No. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, the motion as it's drafted is intended to be responsive to the motion that came out of Budget Committee.
Okay.
The Budget Committee already has your recommendation for the $5.5 million reduction, which came through the board last meeting. They've come back and asked for considerations to come before them again with information to consider as alternatives 3.5 or 4.5. So in that sense, this motion, they're not asking, as I read their motion, they're not asking the board to come back and recommend this or recommend that. What they're asking the board to do is provide them with further information on which they can compare to your original proposal to them last week.
So where I'm a little confused, and maybe because Budget Committee asked for it, it made a difference. So when we had our first discussion at the Police Commission, one of the comments that I was wondering was can we send scenarios to the council? And the answer, obviously, which is kind of similar to what you said, was, well, no, because we have to send a budget. So as a commission now, really, it's just because it came with a budget committee, we're just filtering it. We have, if we wanted to choose a scenario, it still would be kind of like out of order in the sense of we wouldn't be able to choose a scenario because it wasn't a motion that came out of the commission.
I think the answer, Madam Chair, to the commissioner, the question is responding to the budget commission, what the budget committee has asked for. So that's what they're asking you for. Now you can defeat this and add some other motion, but that's not responsive to what they're asking. So you've already recommended a budget to them, and they're asking for other information on which they can assess whether they want to go with that or they want to go with something else. So that's basically, and your role here is really to look at what the chiefs come forward with and see if how that aligns with your existing policy considerations that you have. But I'm presuming because the previous budget you passed forward, right, was not inconsistent with your budget considerations. Presumably these are not too. So you're basically saying you got to look at it and then off to the budget committee with the information they're asking.
So alternatively, the budget committee could take the first recommendation of the 5.5, like whatever the number is, the first 5.5 if they wanted to, but obviously, the budget committee asked for other scenarios. So really it's up to the budget committee to choose where we want to go. Okay, all right, I'm great, thank you.
Okay. Any other? Oh, Carol?
Carol here. I have a question. The original budget that we presented and then agreed to a reduction of 5.5 million. This motion says in comparison to the proposed 5 million budget reduction. Is that not an error, or am I missing something here?
Madam Chair, to the Deputy Chair, no, because in effect, if you remember the original budget reductions and the presentation that went forward, it spoke to compensation and it spoke to capital expenses. And in effect, the information that's been presented today speaks to those same issues. So the budget committee therefore is in a position to make a comparison between the scenario.
Actually, that's not my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The dollar value.
The figure it's the dollar value, because the original, when we sent that budget with the reductions, it was a 5.5 million budget reduction, not a 5 million.
I see. Well, no, now that's
yeah. If we look, We look at Dan's slide.
The problem is there's an error in the motion that was passed, I think, at the budget committee.
At council
Yeah.
or budget.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think they spoke to a 5 million in their motion coming out of that. I think they said 5 million. Is that correct, Jane? I think.
I was just checking the, to see if I could find the exact copy of the motion. The budget reduction was 5.5 million. So if the budget committee motion said 5, I think it was an error in the motion.
It's
So
an error,
thank
so
you.
perhaps the best thing to do here would be, well, I think you can take your choice. You can either use the 5 million or the 5.5. It's gonna, when they come forward, they're gonna make the comparison with the budget you passed anyway, right?
I think we can deal with it at council.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion?
Call for the question.
Great, we'll call for the question. I'm just going to go in order again. Commissioner McDougall, yay or nay?
Yay.
Commissioner Beals, did you join us? Carlos? No. Lisa?
Yay.
Tony Mancini?
Yay.
Lindell?
Yay.
Tony Thomas?
Yay?
And I'm a yay as well, so the motion is passed. Great. No other further discussion on the budget at this point in time. Robin, I think you and your folks have everything you need because the motion was there prior to the meeting, so you should have all of the wording. So if there's nothing else, then meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
Sorry,
you, everyone.
I just
Good night.
want to add one comment. If you could please, Tony and councillors, when you go back to budget committee, could you amend this so that it reflects the actual original reduction, the 5.5? I just think it's really important that that be captured too.
Yeah.
Will do.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks much, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.